Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Chulin, daf Nun Tes, number 59. And we're starting from the Mishnah. Hi, we're just getting started from the Mishnah on daf Nun Ches Amid Beis, towards the bottom. So the Mishnah begins. Let me make it bigger. So the Mishnah, it's easy Mishnah. Mishnah is pretty much straightforward. So achuza sadam, if an animal has an overabundance of blood, v'ha'amu shenis, or if an animal was in a fire and suffered smoke inhalation, v'hamtzu nenes, if an animal got very, very cold. Rashi says this is a choyle machmasina, it's a sickness because of the coldness. Then the Mishnah says, hardufni, if it ended up eating hardufni. Hardufni is like a spice. Actually, it's oleander. So it's a poison for animals, but not humans. Okay. So the question is, obviously, is it going to make it a treifa? That's what we're discussing over here. Or if the animal ate the waste product of a chicken, or drank contaminated waters. So the Mishnah says that's not a treifa. Kashera, you can shech that animal and it's a kosher animal. Ochla sam hamabes, but if it ate real poison that's even poison for a human being, so oishe kisha nochash, or if a snake bit into it, right? Bit into the animal, muteres mushum treifa. It's not a treifa. However, a Jew is not allowed to eat it. V'asura mishum sakanas nefashos, because it's dangerous for a human, because the poison in the animal's body cannot be eaten by a regular person. So therefore, it's not a treifa, but it's dangerous to eat such an animal. Amar Shmuel said, he'll eat if it swallowed chiltis. Chiltis is something, if it's swallowed asafoetida. It's a type of spice used treifa. It's the animal can become treifa. It's a spice used in food, for human food, but if an animal will eat it, it'll become a treifa. Maitama, the menakvale lemayona, it makes holes on the inside of the animal. So therefore, says the Gemara, Mosiv Rav Shizvi. Rav Shizvi asked the question, he'll eat the tia, chiltis, upilpelin. If an animal ate this chiltis, or pepper, or even if it ate poison, kshera, it's kshera. So right over here, you have a question against Shmuel. Shmuel says if it eats chiltis, it is a treifa. And here the Brisa says if it eats chiltis, it's a kosher animal. You could shecht it. Then the Brisa says also, if it ate poison, it's kashera, and you're shecht it and eat it. But our Mishnah says if it eats poison, you're not allowed to eat it. Asura mishum sakanas nefashos. So the Gemara, that's the Gemara's question. We'll finish the Brisa. The Brisa finishes off and says if it was eaten by a snake or was bitten by a rabid dog, muteris mishum treifa. It's not a treifa. It's dangerous for a human being to eat it. So kasha chiltis al chiltis, kasha samamavas. Chiltis on chiltis is a question against Shmuel. Shmuel says it's a treifa. The Brisa says it's kshera. Samamavas. Our Mishnah says if you eat samamavas, a human is not allowed to eat it. A yid is not allowed to eat that animal. And this Brisa says if it ate sam hamavas, a yid could eat the animal. So the Gemara says like this: like chiltis, like kasha. The chiltis to the chiltis, it's not a question, is because kan ba'olid, if it eats the leaves, that's very dangerous. That's not dangerous. So then it's kosher. But kan, what Shmuel's talking about, bikratim, if it ate the stalks, so the stalks are more dangerous than the leaves, and therefore, if it ate the stalks, that's when Shmuel says it's a treifa, because it punctures the insides of the animal. Sam amavis like kasha is two different types of poisons. Hadida, hadadam. If it's just a poison that could only poison animals, then a Jew could eat it. It's not a treifa, and a Jew could shecht it and eat it. But if the animal ate a human poison, right? So then even a human, and then a yid should not eat that animal because it's a kanas defashis. Samamovas the behema hainihun difni. If that's what samamovas in the Bryce is referring to, a animal poison, isn't that the same thing as our dufni? Oleander is a type of animal poison. And says Gemara, Trey Gavna Samamovas. It gave you two examples of animal poisons. But basically the Samamovas that the Bryce is referring to is animal poison, and therefore, even if it ate animal poison, a Jew could shech that animal and eat it. But the Bryce said if it ate tia, it also you could eat it. My tia, what is a tia? Rabbi Yehuda says, Ikra de Marisa, the root of a bitter herb, a bitter plant. Ama Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said like this: Hai man the ochol klosa tikle. If a person eats 3 coins worth, 3 of the weight of a shekel. Okay, so let's say a shekel weighs 2 ounces. So if you eat 3 coins worth of the weight of chiltis, okay, then aliba reikana, on an empty stomach, mishtalach mashre. It's so potent that your skin will fall off. Okay, Amar Rababo said, I had a situation. I was very sensitive. I eat even the weight of 1 coin of chiltis, and if I didn't sit into cold water right afterwards, mishtalach mashkai, all my skin would have fell off. And therefore I kept amongst myself the intelligence, the knowledge that you have can save your life. In other words, Rabbi Bo wasn't just learning Torah; he understood medical science, and he was an EMT, so he saved his own life knowing what to do after he ingested some chilta, a shekel's weight of chilta. Amma Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is also talking about things that are bad to eat. Haimam, the ochol shitzrebeya. If a person eats shitzrebeya, 16 eggs at one shot, va'aboy amguze, and 40 nuts, v'shav butise de parche, and seven of the caper plants flowers, v'shase reviyase de dufshe, and he drinks a quarter of a lug of honey. So he had this funny type of diet that he ate. And he ate it b'tkufas tamas, and he ate it in the summer months. Alibe reikana, on an empty stomach. Misaker talia delibe, his heart, the things that hold his heart in place, will disintegrate. In other words, come apart, and he could get a heart attack, basically. Says the Gemara, Chasusham, Hahu bar Tavya, the Asya, the Bay Reish Galusev, the Hava. There was this, let's say, goat. Okay, bar Tavya is an animal. Okay, that what the Asya Bay Garusa that came to the Reish Galusa. Dava mipasik karam basraisa. It was missing its back leg. Batke Rav b'tzoymes hagidin. Rav checked to see if the tzoymes hagidin were intact, where the sinews gather in the leg, a little bit below the knee. So v'achshere, and he made the animal kosher, and he allowed the Reish Galusa to eat the animal. And not only that, sava lemechel minei b'umza. And Rav himself wanted to eat the meat raw. You know, he felt his psak is 100%, and he wanted to even partake in that meat. Amalei Shmuel said, your halachic psak is correct, but aren't you worried about a poison? Maybe the animal lost its leg by being bitten by a snake, and the poison of the snake is in the animal, and it's a dangerous for a person to eat it. Amalei, my tekantis. Rav asked Shmuel, what should I do? How do I know for sure? So noisve betanure. You put the meat in the oven. The iu badik benafshe. Then you'll be able to check it by itself. Oisvi, they put the meat into an oven. Nafek tilcha tilcha, and it started to come apart. Unexplainably, it started to peel apart into pieces. So obviously, this animal was poisoned. So Kari Shmuel alei Rav. So basically, Shmuel saved Rav's life. So Shmuel said to Rav, "Lo yiuna tzaddik al oven." For a tzaddik like you, nothing, no mishap can happen, because I came in the nick of time to protect you from eating such poisonous meat. Kari Rav alei Shmuel. Rav said about Shmuel, "Kol roz le anaslach." No secret is withheld from you. I mean, how would you know to check for poison without being so familiar with the sciences? So that was the story between Rav and Shmuel. New Mishnah. Simone behema b'chaya nemer b'Torah. Everybody knows what's a kosher animal, what's a kosher wild animal. That's clearly written in the Torah. Split hooves and choose its cud. The simone oif, but what's a kosher bird? Loy nemer. It doesn't say in the Torah what's a kosher bird. The Torah just lists you birds that are not kosher, but what makes a non-kosher bird? Aval Amr Chachamim said, Kol oif hadoires, any bird that claws its prey, it has these talons and it claws its prey to eat it, Tame, that's a Tame bird. Kol sheyesh loy etzbar yisera. If a bird has an extra digit, so like you can see in the picture over here, it has an extra digit over here coming out from the hind of the front. So then, or v'zefek, it has a crop, or v'kurkavonai niklaf, the gizzard, part of the inside of the animal, has a membrane that can easily be peeled, then you know that bird is a kosher bird. Again, we don't know what a kosher bird is exactly, even if we follow this. And in fact, there's some people that will not eat turkey because you only eat birds that you have a Masorah on. Rab Lazar Bar Tzadok says, "Kol oif achoylek esraglev tameh." So here he gives you if a bird will split its legs, we don't know what that means. We'll see what that means in the Gemara. It's a tameh bird. Uvechagavim. What's a kosher grasshopper? So here's the picture of a kosher grasshopper. It has basically 6 legs, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and then these 2 wings that help it fly or jump. They're called kartzelin. Anyway, this is a kosher grasshopper. Kol sheyesh le'arba kalaglayim, barba kanafayim has 4 legs, 4 wings, v'kartzulayim, uknofav chayfenes ruboy, and its wings cover most of its body. Rabbi Yossi says, Ushmoy Chagav. It has to be known, called Chagav. And Chagav is the name of a kosher grasshopper. What makes kosher fish? Uvadogim kol sheyesh snapir. It has fins, the kaskasas and scales. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shnei kaskis kasin. It has to have 2 scales, usnapir and 1 fin. The Eilein kaskaskin, what is called a scale, hakavuyim boy, that's part of the body of the fish. Usnapirim, what's a snapir? Aparech, that helps the fish swim. So that's the fins. So Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Let's take a look at a picture of an animal. You have an animal right here on the screen. So it chews its cud, right? It swallows, and as you can see, that the animal it comes down the food pipe, right? But where does it go? It goes into the keres, and then it goes into the base hakoisis, and from the base hakoisis, it makes it into a cud, makes whatever it ate into like a little bally, and then it shoots it back up the windpipe, and it chews it again, and then after it chews it, it swallows it again. It goes into the hemsis, and then from there to the keva. So that's how the four stomachs of an animal work. Now, one other thing about a kosher animal, it has no front teeth. So the Gemara is going to say is that every kosher animal has no front teeth, but a camel has no front teeth either, but it's not kosher, and it chews its cud. But the animal of a camel has a side tooth over there, as you can pretty much see it on the picture. But we'll get to that in the Gemara in a second. So Tanna Rabbanan rabbis taught, Eluhein simani behema. These are the telltale signs of an animal. Kol behema mafreses parsa. Kol behema shemalas geira. Any animal that chews its cud, biyudua she'ein lo shnayim lamalo u'tanahira. Then you know it doesn't have teeth above. So the Gemara doesn't like that inference. If an animal chews its cud, you know it doesn't have front teeth. Uklalihi, is that a true rule? Vare gomo, but the camel, the malageru, it chews its cud, ve'ein lo shnayim lamala, and it has no teeth on top, v'tame, and it's tame. And says the Gemara, gomo niva isle. A camel, like a horse, has like on the top, it does have some sort of protrusion that are not exactly teeth, but it has something more than a regular cow. Therefore, it's tame. Says the Gemara, very ben gomel, a young camel, the nibinami leslu, it doesn't have even these protrusions, and yet it's a tame animal. Vasu, let's take another animal. You're telling me that if it chews its cud, it doesn't have front teeth. What about the rabbit? Vayeshofen, Barneves, the Malageris hain, they chew their cud, the Yeshlam Shnayim, but they have teeth, Lamala Utmeim, and it's Tame to eat a rabbit. Another question, Shnayim Miksiva Baraisa, why am I looking for teeth? What is that going to help me in determining if the animal is kosher? The Torah mentions no mention about teeth as one of the simonim of an animal. Ella, what the Gemara is discussing over here is sometimes you're in a situation where you cannot determine if the animal is kosher or not. Why? You'll see in a second. If you see that it doesn't have teeth, if it doesn't have front teeth at all, then you know it's a kosher animal. It chews its cud and it has split hooves, utahira. And so the Gemara says, just look at its hooves. Why do I need to look to see if it has teeth? Just look at its hood. And says the Gemara, if you found an animal and you don't know what it is, if it's kosher or not, and its hooves are cut, so it's not a treifa, so you just check to see if it has teeth. If it has no front teeth, then you know it's a kosher animal. Like the case of Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda taught us. If someone was going on a desert, and he finds an animal that the feet are cut, he checks the teeth in the mouth, and if it has no teeth on top, so you just check to see if it has teeth. Says the Gemara, you should make sure it's not a camel. Says the Gemara, a camel has some sort of teeth on the front. Make sure it's not a young camel. But as long as you know it's not a camel, teeth checking is good enough. Says the Gemara asks a very interesting question. You're telling me that just checking teeth, and if it has no teeth, it's a kosher animal, right? No front teeth. And the only animal in the world that has no front teeth, and it's a non-kosher animal, is the camel, the young camel. Maybe there's a species out there that you don't know about that has no front teeth, and it's a non-kosher animal. Lav Amar Ika Ben Gomel, Ikanami Mina Achrina, the Damila Ben Gomel. Maybe out there in the wild, there's another species that's not kosher, that it's like a young camel that has no front teeth. So how could you say, just look at the teeth, it's a kosher animal? And says the Gemara, Loi Salka Daita. The Tani Rebbe Rabbi Shmuel, Vesa Gomel Kimala Gerehu. The camel is the only one that chews its cud and doesn't have teeth. Shalit by Loimoi, the one that owns the world, which is God. There's nothing that chews its cud and is non-kosher, only the camel. And basically means that it has no front teeth. The ficha parabaya cause of who? It's the only unique animal in the world that will chew its cud, and as a young camel, it will have no front teeth, and only that is tameh. So if you know it's not a camel, so then looking at the teeth would be fine. Same thing like this. Rav Chizda taught us, you're going on the way, and you find an animal that its mouth is distorted. So you can't look if it chews its cud, whatever. And you look at its hooves. In parsasel sedukas, if it has split hooves, biyadu tahira. In lav, biyadu tameya. If it doesn't have split hooves, then you know it's a tamei animal. Uvad, but make sure sheyakir chazir, that you know it's not the swine, the pig, because this pig has split hooves and it's not a kosher animal. Says the Gemara, isn't there another animal that's possible that will be similar to the pig, that has split hooves and it's a non-kosher animal? So how could you tell me, as long as you know it's not a pig, if it has split hooves, it's a kosher animal? Maybe there's also another non-kosher animal that has split hooves, and yet it's non-kosher. So just looking at hooves wouldn't tell you automatically that an animal's kosher. Says the Gemara, Loisal Kadaita. It's the only one that has split hooves that's non-kosher. God knows that there was only one animal in the world that has split hooves and it's not kosher, and that's the chazir. The ficha parabaya cause of who? Therefore, the Torah says only the chazir is that way, and because of that, if you find yourself in the way, and you find an animal, you know for sure it's not a pig, and it has split hooves, and you can't tell if it chews its cud, it's kosher animal. The Amar of Rav Chizda said, if you're going in a desert, you find an animal that has a closed mouth, or you can't tell, but its hooves are cut. So now you can't tell if it chews its cuds. You can't tell if it has split hooves. So is there another way to check to see if it's an animal that's kosher? Yes, there is. Take a look at the way the flesh is shaped. In Mahalach Shesi Erev, if some of the flesh go horizontally and vertically, then you know it's a kosher animal. If it only goes in one direction, then it's a non-kosher animal. All right, make sure it's not a wild donkey. If it's not a wild donkey, so says the Gemara, Lav Ika Amr Ika Arid, Ika Namamina Achrina Damil Arid. Maybe this is an animal that's similar to a wild donkey that also has a Shesi Ve'erev, and it's not kosher. And so Gemara Gemiri Deleke, we have a tradition, halacha ma'ashina, that there's no other animal besides the wild donkey. So as long as you know it does, let's say you're in the desert, you can't tell if it chews its cud. You can't see if the hooves are cut, so you can't check that, and you know it's not a wild donkey. The Gemara says that just check the shape of the flesh. If it goes vertical and horizontally, then it's a kosher animal. Which part of the body do you check? It's by the tailbone. So the way he pictures it over here, so by the tailbone. By the tailbone is, here we go, the Shesi Ve'erev. Here's the pig, and here's the meat going backwards and forwards. That's the way he has it over here in the picture. And here's the tail. Right over here is the tail. Right over here is, here's the tail. The end is the tail. And somewhere over there, the skin goes in two different directions, right? It goes this way and that way. If you check that, then you know it's a kosher animal. Tana Rabbana, rabbis taught, Eluhain Simone Chaya. This is the way to know if it's a kosher wild animal. Says the Gemara, Chaya B'chal B'hema Hila Simonim. Of course, I don't need a simonim to tell you what's a kosher wild animal. If it chews its cud, like a deer, and a split hooves, it's kosher. What do I need that for? Amr Rab Zera says, lahatir chelba. If you don't know if the animal is, you have to know sometimes if it's a wild animal or a regular animal. What's the difference between a kosher wild animal and a kosher animal? The answer is a kosher wild animal, the fats are permitted. But a kosher domesticated animal, the fats are prohibited. So it's important to know what's a chaya and what's a behema. V'hachi kamar, and this determines eluhein simoni chaya. What's a kosher chaya? Shechel b'mutter, that you're permitted to eat the fats. Kol sheyesh lo karnayim utlafayim, if it has horns and hooves. Rab Daisi Aimet and Yesh Lakanayim Iatatzarach Lachser al Tlofayim. If it has horns, then you don't have to check to see if it has hooves. Yesh Latofayim, if it has hooves, then Tzarachat Lachser al Karnayim, then you have to check for the horns. The keresh, this wild animal, kosher animal of a keresh, Afal Pisha Ein Lo Ela Karen Achas, it has one horn. Mutter, you're allowed to eat the fats because it's a chaya. Says the Gemara. So what determines, you're telling me if it has horns, that automatically makes it a kosher wild animal? Klalahu, is that a general rule? V'hare'ez, you have the goat, the yeshla karnayim utlafayim, it has horns and hooves. The chelbayasa, a goat is a domesticated animal, and the fats are asa, and it has horns. And says the Gemara, kruchas be'inim. We need layered horns. It's not one piece, but it looks like when you check it out on the inside, it looks somewhat layered. As you can see in this picture, right over here, it's layered, like one piece on top of another. You can see it's somewhat layered. That makes it a kosher wild animal. Says the Gemara, Ashar, an ox, the kruches, the chelbay asa, but an ox also has layered, and its fats is asa, and Gemara, charukais, be'inan. You need it also to have grooves on the outside. It has to have somewhat grooves on the outside. Says the Gemara, the charukis, v'chelbay asar. A goat has grooves on the outside, and the chelbay is asar. So the Gemara says, mefutsal lois be'inen. You needed to go have branches. Says the Gemara, tzvi, an ibex. Tzvi in the Gemara is an ibex. The ein mefutsal doesn't have branches. V'chelbay muta chadurais be'inen. You need it to be rounded. So let's just see. The Gemara just gave you a bunch of klolim, but the bottom line is it has to have branches, right? It has to have branches. It has to have branches, and then it has to be rounded. You see, like in the ibex, it doesn't have branches on it. It doesn't have these like branches on it. Plus, it's not rounded. It has to be rounded, and there, a goat, an aze, it is more wider. It's not like a perfect circle in their horns. So the Gemara concludes, Hilkach, therefore, if you find an animal that has little branches on its horns, you know it's a wild kosher animal. No need to investigate further. It's kosher. You can eat the fats. When you don't see it have branches, then be'inin kruches, chaduras, v'charukas. Then you have to have that the horns are layered, are layered, rounded, and also grooved. And the grooves have to be swallowed in one to another. Behind Sveika, the Iza Karkois. The Iza Karkois, the goat from Karkois, they weren't sure if it was an animal, a kosher, it's a kosher animal, but they didn't know if it's a chaya or a behema. And concludes the Gemara, he Iza the Karkas. There was this goat from Karkas, the Have Be Reish Galusa, that was in the house of the Reish Galusa, the Aker, Molet Sana the Tarba B'nei. They brought a basket full of fats from this animal. And the question was, can we eat this fats? Is it a domesticated animal or is it a kosher chaya? Rav Achai Asa. Rav Achai says it's Asa because it's a behema. Rav Shmuel Bereid Rabbi Abbo Achamene, he ate it. Karen Nafshe, he said about himself, Mipri P is Tizba Bitnai. If a person learns well, he could fill his stomach. Rav Shmuel was very confident that this Iza Karkois was really a chaya, and you're allowed to eat the fats. Shalchu mitam, and they sent the letter from there. Hilkasa kavase de Shmuel bereder bavo. The halacha is like Shmuel bereder bavo, that this Iza karkois is really a chaya, but vizaru beRabbeinu Achai. Don't eat it in front of Rabbeinu Achai. Shemeir einai gailahu. He was a big tzaddik, and in front of him, don't show that you're eating this Iza Chagai's fats, because that's an insult to him. But really, the halacha is like Shmuel bereder bavo. That's Iza karkois is a kosher chaya. Okay, we'll catch up a little bit tomorrow.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.